Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Tuesday morning, November the 26th. A lot to talk about this morning. We have a cold wave coming to much of the nation. Really gets underway later this weekend. Looks like it'll continue probably through the first couple of weeks of December. Does not mean that every single day in that time period will be below normal, but on average, right through the second week of December, it looks like below normal temperatures for much of the nation. We also have significant snowfall falling right now across some of those higher elevation locations of the western U.S., all the way from the Sierra Nevada mountains of eastern California to the Colorado Rockies over the next 24 to 36 hours or so. There's already been a decent amount of snowfall in those Sierra Nevada mountains. Later this week, from Thursday into Friday, looks like significant snowfall in the interior sections of the northeastern part of the nation. Let's say from upstate PA to upstate New York to interior sections of New England. Again, that's from later Thursday into Friday. And the Great Lakes will then get pounded by some lake effect snows later Friday into Saturday. And it looks like there can be multiple Great Lake snow events over the next couple of weeks during this cold wave, which again will impact much of the U.S. going right into the second week of December. Well, let's start off here with a look at that upcoming cold wave. What we're looking at here is the forecast set of maps from the ensemble run of the European model from last night. 5-day increments of the average 850 millibar temperature anomaly. Again, averaged out over those 5 days. This is the current 5-day period that extends from today all the way to the 1st of December. Now, we'll just walk through this and watch this pattern. This is just a persistent pattern of colder than normal conditions in the eastern half of the nation, the central and eastern states, going all the way out to days 11 to 15. That's December 6th all the way to December 11th. Now, keep in mind, ensemble runs tend to kind of smooth things out as you go forward in time because they kind of take on more and more importance to climatology as the forecast time period, the verification time proceeds. So, yes, it looks a little bit less cold here relative to normal when you get out all the way out to days 11 to 15. But again, part of that is as a result of the normal smoothing effect of an ensemble run. Let's go through this once again here. And again, a very impressive cold wave, one of the coldest starts to the month of December in many, many years, coming to, again, much of the nation. Here we go, this 5-day period, the next 5-day period. Now we're all the way out to days 4 to 8 here. This is the 29th to December 4th. Very impressive, colder than normal conditions. It sticks around for a while. It has some staying power, and we'll talk about the reasons why over the next couple of minutes. Again, this goes all the way out to December 11th, that 5-day period from the 6th to 11th. And by the way, the same time frame, you'll see much above normal conditions out across the western half of the nation. Well, let's just give kind of one particular time frame here to show what kind of impact we're talking about with respect to these 850 millibar temperature anomalies. This is actually the 2-meter surface temperature anomalies for a specific time next Thursday night. And look at this impressive cold air outbreak at this particular time. Again, this is for next Thursday night, December 5th, and it extends all the way down into Florida, the Gulf region, Texas, really all the way down into Mexico and even down to the northern coastline of Cuba below normal temperatures. But this is very impressive when you're looking at 20 to 25 degrees below normal for the early part of December. Now, one thing I want to point out, by the way, in the western part of North Carolina right now, there are still numerous people that are in tents because of the after effects of the hurricane, the flooding that went through that area. Boy, they ought to get ready to move to better shelter than tents because it will get awfully cold by this weekend, and especially next week in those areas of western North Carolina, again, where some people are housing in tents right now. Get ready for this cold wave because it certainly will have an impact on those mountains in western part of North Carolina. But look, all the way down to Florida, southern Texas, well below normal. Again, this is just a snapshot of time for late Thursday of next week, but this entire period from basically late this week, early this week, and through about the 10th or 12th or so of December. Very cold indeed, and again, one of the coldest starts to the month of December in many years. Well, let's take a look now at the upper air pattern. What we're looking at are the 500 millibar height anomaly forecast maps. Again, from the ensemble run of the European model, and again, averaged out in 5-day periods here. This is the current 5-day period with a trough centered over the Hudson Bay region of Canada and extending all the way down into the eastern states. But watch how this pattern evolves over the next 5, 10, 15 days or so. We'll move out again in 5-day increments. Here is a ridge starting to pop up along the west coast of the U.S. and Canada, a strong ridge up over to the north and west of Alaska, and that trough continue to show up here on the east coast side. This is the 5-day period from the days 5 to 9, November 30th to December 5th. Go out a little bit farther in time here, all the way out to the latter part of this time period, and we have this kind of a classic situation with ridging along the west coast of Canada and the U.S., and ridging extends all the way up to Alaska and to places west of there in the western Pacific Ocean, the eastern Pacific Ocean, and the west coast again of Canada and the U.S. at the same time. Trough over the eastern states. Now, go out a little bit farther in time, and one thing I want to point out here, we talked about this as early as last week about the possibility of cross-polar flow. What I mean by that is air from the other side of the North Pole, on the Siberian side of the North Pole, can come across in this kind of a pattern to the North America side of the North Pole and ultimately make its way down into the central and eastern U.S. And that is usually very, very cold air, again, originating on the Siberian side of the North Pole. This right here at the top of this map is the North Pole. You see this kind of a flow can allow for cross-polar flow. Again, this is now into the early part of December, in that days 11 to 15, December 6th to the 11th. So we have this possibility of a Siberian connection to this cold wave that's coming up again. One of the coldest starts to the month of December in many, many years. So you have this deep trough kind of situated over the east coast and extending up into eastern Canada. You do have some high latitude blocking over Iceland and the northern part of the Atlantic. You have this strong ridge centered right here over the west coast of the U.S. and Canada. And again, all this allows for the transport of very cold air masses from northwestern Canada and perhaps even from the other side of the North Pole into the central and eastern U.S. And this region extends all the way across Alaska and to the west of there in portions of the western Pacific Ocean. Well, I wanted to show this map. It kind of summarizes the 500 millibar height anomaly pattern that's coming down the road here, and it relates it to teleconnection indices. We often talk about teleconnection indices. These are indices that kind of give us some information about different parts of the world, because what happens in one part of the world certainly can have an impact on the other part of the world. Here, these are several different teleconnection indices we often talk about here. The negative North Atlantic oscillation, in this case a negative, the PNA, the Pacific North America, and we have the Eastern Pacific Oscillation and Western Pacific Oscillation. This is what is likely to happen in that first week of December. This encompasses that 5-day period. The average height anomaly of 500 millibars in that period from December 5th to December 10th using the ensemble run of the European model. And this is a classic cold pattern, classic winter pattern for the central and eastern U.S. when you have that ridge that's popping up along the west coast of the U.S. and Canada, and ridge and extending all the way out into Alaska and to the west of there in the western Pacific Ocean. At the same time, you have some sort of high latitude blocking. This keeps this whole pattern in place, and that's why this cold wave has some staying power. It begins late this week and continues again, looks like likely through the second week of December. Not necessarily every single day below normal, but on average, given a 5-day period, a 10-day period, or the next couple of weeks, certainly below normal temperatures across the central and eastern U.S. And of course, we have this deep upper level trough kind of focused on the East Coast during this time period. So a classic winter-like pattern, again, all allows for that cross-polar flow, that Siberian connection here that kind of enhances the threat of severe cold into the central and eastern U.S. Now, one last map I'd like to show with respect to that Siberian connection here that I've talked about, and then we'll kind of focus in on the Great Lakes events coming up. This is what we call a trajectory model, a backward trajectory model, where you can actually trace the origination of air parcels from one location and track the trajectory from that location into a new location. This is showing here that by later next week, early part of next week, December 2nd in this case, the air parcels that end up here on December 2nd, you go backwards to the origin. Some of these actually show originating on the other side of the North Pole being right here. So the main point I want to show in this map is this kind of provides some supporting evidence that there will be indeed a Siberian connection to this cold wave. Some of the air parcels originate on the Siberian side of the North Pole and end up crossing the pole and coming all the way down into the central and eastern U.S., reaching the mid-Atlantic coastline by the 2nd of December, early next week. So again, this is kind of an interesting way to look at the Siberian connection, a backward trajectory model that shows air from Siberia can make its way into North America during this next couple of weeks. Let's spend a couple of minutes here on the Great Lakes snow machine, because indeed this looks like a pattern, this cold wave coming to much of the nation that will produce not one, not two, but maybe multiple, maybe 3 or more Great Lakes snow events here. One looks like it'll take place from later this Friday into the day on Saturday. Really, in some places along the eastern Great Lakes, that could extend all the way through the upcoming weekend. Again, multiple events here over the next couple of weeks. This is the latest look at water temperatures in the Great Lakes, still unfrozen for sure. And here is the scale here with a Fahrenheit showing up. Most of the greens, for example, are near or above 50 degrees, and even some light browns all the way up into the 60-degree range. So you're seeing a lot of these water temperatures right here, Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, Huron, and Lake Michigan, in the 50s and even the 60s in some places, a little bit colder up across Lake Superior here, down into the 40s here. But bottom line here, these are still relatively warm temperatures. And when you get that cold Arctic air, Siberian air, if it, in this case, crossing these still relatively warm waters of the Great Lakes, you really destabilize the atmosphere tremendously, and you get that buoyancy down in the lower part of the atmosphere that leads to strong upward motion, destabilization of the atmosphere, and that in turn squeezes out the moisture in the form of heavy snow just downstream of these lakes here. And it certainly looks like there'll be significant snow later Friday into Saturday downstream of Erie and Ontario and Huron. And again, that initial Great Lakes snow event can last through the upcoming weekend, and certain to be others next week going into the following week, as this kind of a pattern is classic for turning on that Great Lakes snow machine. You still have the relatively warm waters of the Great Lakes. Well, what kind of snowfall are we talking about with respect to the Great Lakes? This is a forecast map for the next 10 days, roughly the next 10 days between now and 10 days out here, and just some significant snowfall. This area downstream of Lake Ontario, this is the region downstream of Lake Erie, Huron, Michigan, Lake Superior. And again, we're going to have some very, very cold air pouring over these still relatively warm waters of the Great Lakes in this whole time frame from later this week into perhaps the second week of December. Still unfrozen. Many areas will get snowfall measured in the feet, several feet of snow in some areas. It's a little too early to say in particular, for example, if this Friday night, Saturday event will produce a bullseye over Buffalo itself or just to the south of there. Still a little too early to say that where the bullseyes will end up with this initial Great Lakes snow event. Again, later Friday into Saturday on the backside of departing low pressure, strong northwest flow will develop. But again, that looks like it could be biting cold, Arctic type air, in fact, even Siberian air crossing these still relatively warm waters of the Great Lakes. By the way, one last point before we get to the surface weather maps. If you're interested in that lake effect and the process involved with lake effect snow, I do have a video out there on our Meteorology 101 page right here, lake effect snow. It's really an interesting weather phenomenon, and it will come into play beginning later this week into the weekend, and looks like for much of the next couple of weeks there will be this pattern that will produce the lake effect snows again in excessive amounts of snowfall in some spots just downstream of the Great Lakes. Well, let's walk through the surface maps using last night's 0Z run of the European model. We have a cold front coming through right now, the Mid-Atlantic region. It is producing some rainfall from D.C. to Philadelphia to New York City, some very welcome rainfall, by the way. It does not turn all that cold behind it, though. We'll move forward here in time. And by the way, significant snow is falling right now across the interior western part of the nation. They already received some substantial snowfall amounts in the Sierra Nevada mountains right here in eastern California. Continue to do so today through tonight, and that threat of heavy snow extends all the way into the Colorado Rockies, and we'll see in a moment here on a snowfall forecast map. Significant snow measured again in terms of feet in many areas of the Rocky Mountain states from the Sierra Nevada to the Colorado Rockies. Now let's push a little forward here in time. That cold front moves off the coast, and it turns somewhat cooler in the overnight hours across the mid-Atlantic northeast U.S. And this system continues to pound away at Utah, especially those higher elevation locations with snowfall, and the Colorado Rockies into the midweek. And then this low pressure area kind of skips out onto the central plains here and starts to push to the north and east. Begins to intensify later tomorrow over the Mississippi Valley region as it pushes to the north and east. Now, remember we've talked about this dashed blue line here being kind of a useful indicator of that rain-snow line in the winter season here. So you notice here it's cutting across central Pennsylvania at this particular time, and not south of Philadelphia, not to the south of D.C. Now, let's move forward in time here. This system tends to intensify as it slides into the Tennessee Valley by early Thursday. This is Thanksgiving Day here, and it's just not quite cold enough for snow in the I-95 corridor region. It looks like rain moving into D.C., Philadelphia, New York City for late Wednesday night into the day on Thursday. Now you get upstate PA and especially upstate New York and interior New England. Looks like snowfall out of this system from later Thursday into the day on Friday. Let's move forward in time here. And again, there can be in those higher elevation locations of upstate PA, upstate New York, some snowfall, and it can get intense. Let's say the Poconos to the Catskills, once again to the Adirondacks, and those interior mountains of New England. This is by later in the day on Thursday, Thanksgiving Day. This storm system intensifies as it moves to the north and east. And finally, by Thursday night, you have some decent snowfall now just inland across New England and across upstate PA as well. Now, that system really pounds away by early Friday, the state of Maine, where especially upstate Maine can get significant snowfall. Now notice here, down to 986 millibars. That is kind of intensifying all the way in here. So we have this setup here by the time we get to Friday morning. We're departing strong low pressure and incoming high pressure is producing this northwesterly flow of air over the Great Lakes, and we're starting to see those streamers here already early in the day on Friday. This is as that northwest flow starts to kick up over the Great Lakes. Again, still relatively warm waters of the Great Lakes. The Great Lakes snow machine will get turned on during the day on Friday. Let's go out a little bit farther in time here, and here we go by midday on Friday, and then finally by the evening hours on Friday. Again, starting to see some snow showing up here just downstream of the Great Lakes. All of this is as a result of cold air moving over those warm waters, and that pattern just sticks around on Saturday and even into the day on Sunday. We'll go forward here all the way into the day on Sunday, and here we go. We still have this cold flow of air, a lot of it producing some lake effect snows here all the way into the day on Sunday. Notice how far to the south this 540 line right here, let me redraw that, this 540 line goes all the way down into the southeastern states, indicative of the penetration of this cold air all the way down into the southeastern U.S. Again, we have this big push here, all backed up by strong Arctic high pressure that by early Sunday will be sitting over the southern part of Canada. We'll go out a little bit farther in time here, and just a very, very cold start to the month of December. This is going into next Monday, December 2nd, and when you see this kind of a flow here, high pressure over here, so winds blow clockwise around highs, you see the ice bars like this, that is putting some very chilly air all the way down through the state of Florida, central southern Florida, getting involved with some of this below normal temperature by the early part of next week for sure. All of this part of the nation will be well below normal by the early part of next week. And notice, we'll clear this again one last time, still some blues showing up around the Great Lakes. That snow machine gets turned on Friday, and looks like it'll last right into the early part of next week. And again, it can last off and on right into the second week of December. So a lot going on, a very wintry weather pattern setting up for much of the nation. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, this has been meteorologist Paul Dorian.